Now, the symbol I'm talking about for that calendar and that nautical star, you find that in our CIA symbol, in their crest and badge, you'll see that nautical eight-pointed star. Why is that? Well, it's because you're going to get a connection to the satanic holidays and seasons with that. And where does the symbol really go back to beyond ancient calendars? It's connected to vaults and libraries, and you get your occultic books. So where do the CIA, the different black vaults that are all connected within our government, it's all displayed there. You get those who are keepers of those vaults and that knowledge, and that's what that symbol's displaying. Not just holidays, not just ritual times, but the things, the books, the scrolls, the texts, the calendars that those images come out of. So as we begin to understand more about the system, we learn that it's not just about a group of people in a certain region all gathering together to practice their religion. This is a system that we're talking about. It's a foreign government and a foreign military that has been operating all the way back to the land of Canaan, which got
Aloha and welcome back to another show, guys. Today, my special guest is Jessie Czebotar. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell, and share this episode with someone who really needs to hear it. And please, guys, I really do need your help with reviews for the show. If you could write a review and give me positive feedback on Apple or Spotify. If you think I've earned it or feel blessed by today's conversation, I'd be so grateful. So thank you guys for that. Also, YouTube had removed all of my product links in my previous episode. I'm not sure why. I've been doing this going on 4 years. I'm hitting my 4th season coming up in a few months. So I've been doing this for 3 years. And to be honest, everything is getting expensive. You guys know this. Donations for all of those years have totaled just under $500 so far, and I'm so grateful for that. I didn't even think I would get any donations, but I have, and I'm so grateful. Although it barely scratches the surface of what really takes place keeping this show afloat, believe it or not. So I don't want to ask for membership. But if you go to sensiblehippie.com, my original website, you'll find links where I shop. Some of my favorite things that I'm able to put links up on there. And these are things that I've used and love. So, and how and what it really means and what's happening behind the scenes. And why does it hold so much significance in spiritual and occult systems? So I know this is going to be an eye-opening conversation for our audience.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, there's so much information in this. It's really good to be aware of, because I think for most of us, we grow up with this ideal of, that Halloween is something cute, that it's, very harmless, that it's just a time as a kid to get candy and, to dress up, have fun, and do different activities at school and in your community. And it's really lived up. But then behind the scenes, you have all of these occultic things that the world is not made aware of. That when we think about occultic holidays, we have to really think, like, the easiest way I kind of describe it is a nautical star. You have it like presented like a circular calendar that nautical star falls into, with the 4 main points being your 4 main seasons, your Easter, your Christmas, your Halloween, and then you have your fall and spring equinox. And in fact, beyond the 4, you have If you think of a X going through that star that forms a cross in the middle there, you've got 8 holidays altogether, but in the occult, their upper levels, you're only required to attend 4 at least each year. So that would be your Easter, your Christmas, your Halloween, and then one of the spring equinoxes. But you get people in the occult that may not just celebrate those 4. They can declare if they're only going to be adhering to the 4, or if they're going to just be adhering to 4 that are considered off-season practices, or are they going to connect to all 8? Now, the symbol I'm talking about for that calendar and that nautical star, you find that in our CIA symbol. In their crest and badge, you'll see that nautical 8-pointed star. Why is that? Well, it's because you're going to get a connection to the satanic holidays and seasons with that. And where does the symbol really go back to beyond ancient calendars? It's connected to vaults and libraries, and you get your occultic books. So where do the CIA, the different black vaults that are all connected within our government, it's all displayed there. You get those who are keepers of those vaults and that knowledge. And that's what that symbol's displaying, not just holidays, not just ritual times, but the things, the books, the scrolls, the texts, the calendars that those images come out of. As we begin to understand more about the system, we learn that it's not just about a group of people in a certain region all gathering together to practice their religion. This is a system that we're talking about. It's a foreign government and a foreign military that has been operating all the way back to the land of Canaan, which God called Abraham to come out of Canaan. And these people have made alliances with demonic beings. And those alliances are connected to ancient forms of worship of those beings that go all the way back to the land of Canaan. We'll get into some of the conspiracy theories too. The land of giants, the land of ancient cultures, and their contracts with those entities often were communicated in their calendars. So some of the things that I've done to bring out that information, I have a specific episode on Aquarius Rising Africa where I begin to break down the calendar contracts. So if people are interested in that specifically, that's a really good resource. But then I've been putting together within my land assignment coaching series, the Architecture and Altars series, and I get into how the system use architecture to communicate what's there, what's in the region, because it's going to mark a few things. One, their buildings are going to mark, if there's a spiritual gate there or not. The spiritual gates were important for them to mark because that is how they get access into other dimensions. And that's part of the worship of these spiritual beings. Then you have the other part of that, which is their buildings are identified as temples. Now, a temple is a place where they're going to have an altar. That altar serves as a contract between the physical and the spiritual worlds. So as we get into the Halloween season, that's important to understand that it's not just about kids going to different places to get candy and have a good time. It's about their ancient contracts and the altars that are there in those areas, and the spirits connected to those altars. Now, altars work several ways. The altar literally is, like I said, going to be the contract. It will be put on the physical land somewhere, whether that's above ground, whether that's below ground. the architecture will tell you where the altar is. Like, is it in the church building? Is it underneath a house that's near the church? Is it in the woods or in the high places? So the architecture tells you all of that. Where is the altar? And the building will tell you which seasons they're going to be worshiping in. If you've ever been going around and maybe you've seen a big Catholic church, and on that Catholic church, you see like these big high pinnacles with what looks like these spiky things. It looks like an icicle with all these spiky things. Well, that building would tell you that the altars are going to be built in high places. So, not necessarily in the church. They may still have one in there, especially if they've got other architecture. They may have altars that are in the church and outside of. But why did they put the pinnacles there? Because they're telling you that there's access to the high places through that gate. And at those high places in the area is where they'll have the sacrifices. So then you know, okay, well, if I know the altars are going to be in the high places, where's the high ground in this area? Is it a mountain? Is it a hill? But it may not be high ground like we think, because you have ground that's also below the water. So in some areas, specifically Hawaii, you'll have the high ground be underneath the water and connected with the worship of the water spirits. So all of that's in there. So I have the first two, Architecture 1 and 2, are now available on my website. I have Architecture 3 coming up this Thursday. And then I'll get into the other 5 classic forms, or I'm sorry, there's 5 altogether, but I'll get into the other 2 classic forms of architecture next year sometime. Within the system, they only teach you the first 5, but there's actually more forms of architecture. But it starts to get very complex to try to be, put into words. So I'll have to see if I'll get beyond the 5, but that series is going to be a great resource to you guys, because if you're going out anointing or going out into areas around this time and season, what it does is we know that there's going to be altars in the area. Those altars are going to be used to form, as it says in Isaiah 58 in scripture, it talks about that there's chains of wickedness and yokes of oppression. So your altars are going to be connected to the chains of wickedness and the yokes of oppression over the area. That's part of why they're established. The other thing that happens with altars is that altars are a place where, and I may not have the right wording on this, but it's like there's a voice that proceeds forth from the altar. Altars that were built to the Lord, there would be blessings that would go along with the name of the Lord established in that area, and the blessing would go forth over the land. With altars that are done to evil entities, you have a curse that proceeds forth from them. So when we know how to identify by the architecture what altars are in our area, we know which entities are connected to those altars. And then we know what curses, what evils proceeding forth, what wickedness is connected to that place, what yokes of oppression are being put on the people. And with that, the Lord's given us an authority to break those chains of wickedness and those yokes of oppression. Other thing in connection with that is that in my land assignment 2, I get into, they would put the churches in certain positions, do an above ground map of the area to mark out where the shared ritual space is in the area. Well, that very top church, and it could switch, like it's just whatever direction they're going. So your top church could shift when I'm saying that, but whatever one is considered that top point on the triangle of those three, sorry, of those three churches. That one is going to be placed at an actual living wellspring. It will be placed over a waterway with the purpose of desecrating the water. So when we think about everything that's going on at this season, look at where the community is drawing people. They're going to draw people to those spots of high energy during the Halloween time because they want to collect energy. They also want to be able to desecrate and to defile the things of God. It's not a surprise that during that season, you see the church the past century has really been pushing that Halloween's evil and we can't have our kids participate in the community things, but let's do something at our church. You'll have the Jesuit Catholic churches doing the All Saints Day, which really gets into a form of necromancy because they're having the children, they're not going to use these words, but behind the scenes, this is what's happening. Those children are displaying the dead. But really, we know that the saints are not dead. Because in scripture, the Lord says, I am not the God of the dead, but I am the God of the living. But you have all of those children representing those that they view as dead. They're going to be calling on those names. They're going to be doing things behind the scenes that revolve around the necromancy during Halloween time. And, you get really dark stuff. So some of the things, like everything's going to have what looks good. Like you're going to have some places pulling in more of your Samhain views, which are going to be, you could get like the apple, biting at the apples. You could get other things. All of that, they'll put evil stuff in that's going to hurt kids. That goes back to different saints and things that they worship, which on the Reveal report, George and I got into the Halloween special last year with a pastor friend of ours where we spoke about some of the things that he was aware of that went along with the apple biting. But when I was a kid, like what they would do is they would pull in the connection with the apples, the poison apples, and pretty much was almost like a Russian roulette because you didn't know which apple was going to be poisoned. And you would be forced to have to pick one. The good thing was their intent in that was not to kill. It was just they'd put just enough on there that it would make you really sick and you'd get bad gut and throwing up maybe, but you'd be miserable for a couple days and then it would wear off. And all of that was for control, that they would want the kids to believe that they had been poisoned, that they were going to die. And, here's what you need to do if you want to live, as a way to try to force control during that season. But they do, beyond that, you're going to have another great resource to look at the satanic holidays, which we've talked about before, is the Open Scroll calendar. And on there, when you go to Open Scroll calendar /satanic holidays, you can scroll through and you'll see monthly like what the different holidays are. But when we look at, the Halloween season, really things begin around the 13th of every month. So the 13th of every month, they're going to start abducting, and that doesn't just mean that all of the children or people that they sacrifice are going to be stolen or abducted. Let's talk for a minute about kind of their resources for that. One, they're really going to hit homeless communities. So I'm grateful things are getting cleaned up in the big cities because that's a highly targeted population, especially around satanic ritual times. Um, it's easy when people are unaccounted for them just to, be missing, and they usually would end up sacrifices. Um, so around the 13th, they're going to start gathering, beyond your homeless, beyond, kids that might be stolen or taken above ground. Really, you have the majority of the mass supply coming from underground. And that's going to connect to your breeder programs and your human markets that they have underground, where they're moving people through like cattle. They're buying, selling, and trading people that, the majority of these people have never seen the above ground. It's hard for us to fathom that there could be such a thing, but there are mass amounts of people that have never even been above ground. Um, in your area, what you would look for, the only way I can describe it is usually, um, you can get cages underground being displayed in different ways, but one of the ways it will be displayed is you'll have these perfectly squared, taller buildings. Like the old jailhouses used to be built that way. So if you look up the old brick jailhouses, you'll see how it's perfectly squared. Um, and most of those now have been bought up by historical societies. So the land is marked as historic. So those things can be things to look for in your area. Do you have buildings like that? If so, that might be a place where they're holding people. Um, So then the next big thing is they're gathering. The rituals are going to start October 28th. They're going to continue all the way through to November 4th, actually. So they'll just continue on that whole time, with the 31st being the grand high climax, meaning that will be the night with the most sacrifices. So the 28th is considered the Satanist high holy day. And the 28th through the 30th, you'll have blood sacrifices. You'll have, those will be human, as well as it will be males or females, any age. Um, then you have from the 30th to the 31st. The 30th will be considered All Hallows Eve. That's where they'll start combining blood and sexual. And the sexual revels that they're going to engage in, like revels means orgies. If you see on that calendar satanic revels, that means it's just going to primarily be men, women, children in the orgies. But when you see demonic revels, that means it's going to include bestiality and sex with demons. So Halloween is one of those where they are going to have bestiality and sex with demons. And again, the sacrifices will be any age. And then it kicks right in the very next day after the 31st. It kicks into another high satanic holy day, which is going to be getting into then your All Saints Day and the necromancy of everything, which it gets far worse, because just to be blunt, in this verse through the first, you get forms of necromancy where pretty much you get into the necrophilia, that they're having sex with the dead. And that's the biggest time for that, is the Halloween season, which is partly why they have the children dress up as the saints. It's like that, a way of signifying, who they're claiming they're having sex with, even though it's, are they really having sex with that dead person? Not really. that saint's alive in heaven. They're just defiling the image of that saint in their rituals. And, in that, you have the kids being, taking on an image that's not theirs and participating in that as well. They have no idea in that, because the duality of all of this, those children have learned the Bible studies, they've learned the stories about those saints. And then those images are going to be a form of trauma for them as they're abused in that person's image. So that's kind of, in the nutshell, some of the biggest stuff around Halloween.
Wow. I know you mentioned altars a lot. Is the altar a portal?
It is, in a way, because it sits and interfaces between the physical and the spiritual world. It's different from the gates, though. The best way to describe it would be pretty much that you have your altar kind of established near the vicinity of that gate. Sometimes it can be right on the threshold, sitting between the physical and the spiritual.
Wow. Okay. Where do the roots of Halloween really come from? Is it Celtic, like Samhain, or does it reach farther back to Babylon? I don't know, Egypt, pre-flood time?
Yeah, in my view, it goes much further back. I would put it back into, at its deeper roots, from my understanding, it gets further where you get into the teachings, some of which we see in the book of Enoch, but knowledge that's passed down. There's going to be a direct connection between that nautical star image that we talked about for the ritual seasons and what's known as the giant's wheel. So you have, some of this ancient worship and calendars going back to the Nephilim and their, worship of fallen angels and the authorities that those angels held, and the altars that they built for themselves to be worshipped at. So each of those points of those stars is connected to authority, connected to locations, connected to sacred ritual sites, beliefs, and their worship of fallen entities.
Wow. Does candy, especially when collected and redistributed, hold any kind of ritual or energetic meaning?
It does. The system works off of a principle of willing consent. The easiest way for them to get willing consent is through food or a sweet treat, to say, here, I have a gift for you. Most everybody, especially children, are going to receive it. The moment they receive that from a witch, a warlock, or somebody, it could be prayed over by witches, warlocks. When they put their curses on that, the moment that's received, that curse, it received and internalized, it's like giving willing consent, which then gives them access to be able to create attachments.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Are there specific colors or decorations like orange, black, or the jack-o'-lanterns that tie back to occult contracts?
They do. I don't have all the specifics on those, which ones per se, but a lot of your orange color specifically is going to be, it's connected usually to your fall season, to the corn imagery, your pumpkins, your fall harvest food. When we trace that back, that gets into their corn worship. The pumpkin is meant to kind of, you get the jack-o'-lantern imagery, which represents the head. That specifically is connected to your corn worship. When you look at the corn worship, who are they worshiping at that time? You have the god Ceres, you have Atticus, and you have a few others. Both Ceres and Atticus, whenever you see that god, you'll see the image, and it's little g, God. But whenever you see them, you'll see that they were known for the decapitation. When you know what your corn rituals go back to, those go back to very specific calendars that are connected to your Aztec, Incan, and Mayan contracts. And how were those seasons kicked off? That gets to your September is one you'll see on here as well. Around August 24th to early September, you'll have a decapitation ritual, and then your January to February is your other time you'll get that second decapitation ritual. And those are directly connected to the Aztec, Mayan, Incan under your Order of the Phoenix. Now, some of your groups that will specifically be under that Order of the Phoenix who will participate in those Shabbats, as they call them, will be like your higher levels, your Order of Mongolia, your Order of the Red Banner. I've done a couple special episodes on the progression with the Order of the Red Banner, and connected to that, you'll have your high priestesses, which are known as, they'll be like your upper level Eastern Star women will be called the Order of the Sphinx. And you'll see like they'll have like an Egyptian headdress, and it will have like all these colors, like, here around where the neck is. And you'll see those colors, the mustard yellow, the weird orange, the like a red, but not like your usual red. You'll get like a teal blue color or aqua blue. You see those same colors in your Order of Mongolia in their imagery, and you'll see a scarf in that shape, the same as the women's headdress for the Order of the Sphinx in their badges and emblems. So if you looked up Order of Mongolia, badges and emblems, you'll see that imagery. You'll also see up at the top where the caps, because it kind of looks, they make that headdress image also look like in their banner, like a threshold or an arch, which in your masonry, you'll see that arch symbol with the capstone at top. But instead of the capstone, in both your Order of the Sphinx and your Order of Mongolia, you'll see a red star. And it's a 5-pointed red star, which represents, the 5-pointed star in the Brotherhood system represents what they'll call the Star of Bethlehem. They'll also call it the marriage of the Lamb. And that's significant in several ways. One, when you know the seasons, the ritual seasons, you know that, all of that's going to be connected to your Halloween, your Samhain rituals. And what does that Star of Bethlehem mean? It means that they're going to be engaging in homosexual sex. That's what the 5-pointed star means. But why do they call it the marriage of the Lamb? Because that's a contract that is particularly taken right after the Halloween system. You had, or right before, I'm sorry, the Halloween system. They're building up through the fall equinox into September, and around September 7th is when they do the marriage to the beast ceremony. So then from there, they kick all of those children that have just taken that marriage to the beast rite, and then they will put them through the corn worship contracts. And then that's going to be part of the fire Shabbats. So they'll be entered into like those contracts with the entities that are considered infernals through in connection with your Incan, Aztec, and Mayan calendars. And then from there, they kick into Halloween, which falls under those fire Shabbats. And then that will prepare everything then for you begin your water Shabbats, which the first being considered an ice Shabbat, which is your Christmas season, which you have Saturn and Jupiter contracts that they'll do. Saturn representing the beast or Lucifer, Jupiter representing the Antichrist. And the biggest day of that usually is before Christmas is going to be December 21st, when rituals really start, and you have planetary alignments of Jupiter crossing over in front of Saturn, which represents the Antichrist handing over his authority or power to the beast, to them. So,
oh my goodness.
yeah, so there's a lot there.
Yeah. Do certain neighborhoods or cities get chosen intentionally for heightened ritual activity on this night?
Yes. But that can be a little bit more difficult to figure out because within every region, you're going to have rotating ritual cycles, and they rotate those between the quadrants. So, one season you'll have the northern quadrants, which are going to be all your northern states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Ohio's in there. Another time you'll have your southern states, which could include Texas, New Mexico, Arizona. Then you get your western states, which would include California, Oregon, Washington, and then eastern states, which would include Florida, New York, Rhode Island, Delaware. So within those, just in the US, because you also have it internationally as well. You'll have both simultaneously. And for these 4 big rituals a year, Lucifer himself attends these 4: Christmas, Halloween, Easter, and then one of the Shabbats or the equinoxes. So when he is attending, he will make it so that he is in every ritual space, whether internationally or in the United States. He makes an appearance at each single one. So all of that is timed, and you'll have it simultaneously internationally as well as in the United States. So it could be a little harder to figure out the ritual rotations. But part of how they put that out is you'll start to see when you go into the grocery stores, watch the magazine covers. Sometimes it starts a few months before where they're going to put themes. They'll put famous actresses, actors on there. They'll mention a place, or in the articles where they're highlighting that individual, they'll be identifying which quadrant is going to be in charge of that. And in fact, like, we could look, let's see if some of your higher magazines like Vogue is a huge one that puts out, let's just see what they've got so far for 2025. But they give clues as to where they're going to have everything. So you've got some of their covers. Nope, that's 2015. Oops. Okay, hold on. I pulled up a wrong year. Oh, they got Kendall Jenner. Looks like highlighted. Emma Stone, Gigi Hadid, um, Anne Hathaway. So you're gonna, with the Jenners, you're gonna for sure have the Western quadrants. And then when you look at the cover, they have like Halle Bieber on there, and they have her in a waterfall or like with water. So that's Western quadrant. So it looks like you're going to have a highlight this year, a lot going on in the Western quadrants, um, and certain places that are off of there that they're going to be meeting at.
Would it be somewhere like the Bohemian Grove or something, or they don't meet there really?
You can watch that. They in 2018, Somerset Belanoff rediverted the communications from Bohemian Grove website to the Cathedral of Luxembourg, which is Notre Dame. And it's like, why is Notre Dame taking all the phone calls for Bohemian Grove, right? But in that, then you had Notre Dame burned down. Now it's been rebuilt. So I'm curious as to who's going to be overseeing Bohemian Grove. I think there's still going to be a connection. So watch Notre Dame, watch France. They picked up a lot of the contracts, which is why they had the Olympics. Were the last ones to kind of host those Olympics, because those are all part of the contracts for certain things that they were picking up. Yeah.
Right, because the next Olympic is going to be in LA. And so you think that that church was burnt down on purpose, maybe as a warning or something?
I think it was burnt down on purpose. Yes. Yeah.
Wow. I wonder what the story
Yeah,
behind that is.
Yeah.
Somebody got mad and was trying to say something, maybe a warning. I wonder. Wow, I never thought of that connection. Oh my goodness. So,
I think it was more of a warning and a display of power, because when you look at the system, like I've talked about how Barack Obama is the phoenix of the council. Part of his job is to, after the Babylon portion of the system, is destroyed, his part of his position was to raise up the Leviathan system. So you literally have a display in the burning down of Notre Dame, the old being destroyed, the new being rebuilt, and you had him and Michelle directly involved in that. Curious of all things, and shortly after that, you had him coming out declaring his humanitarian efforts, which dealt with funding and educational, which is what Soros had overseen. And you see Barack Obama, along with Oprah Winfrey, declaring that they're now in charge of those humanitarian efforts in their own little way.
right.
Yeah.
No comment. Are churches that host harvest festivals or trunk or treat unknowingly participating in the same ritual?
Some. You get some that earnestly are just good believers trying to use it as an evangelistic outreach. So I'll put that out there. But then you have churches that are directly involved, particularly in the Kundalini magic, and their purpose is to draw people to connect those spirits and to engage in different forms of Kabbalah magic with that. And it will be connected to the system. They will have access to the children through that and be getting will and consent. They'll be directly living in that duality. So, how can we know? Pray, ask the Lord. Is this church involved? Is it okay for me to participate in this with my kids? Should I not? let the Lord dictate that, because there are, I'm not against people that use it as an evangelistic tool. I think that's needed. It doesn't do anybody in our community good if we just lock ourselves up in our homes. It's like, if your community's gathering, is that an opportunity for us to share the gospel? It absolutely is. Teach your kids how to share the gospel. Teach your kids to hand out tracts. It can be a great way to train your children up in sharing the gospel and in spiritual warfare. What do we look for? What's just simple community fun, and what's more behind the scenes? Awareness is what's going to protect your children, not locking them up in the house. When you teach them what the altars look like, when you teach them how to read the churches and know where's the good places and where's the bad, kids can get back to you with information. They could say, hey, this is what's going on here.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. What role do costumes and masks play in ritual symbolism during Halloween?
Yeah, you get a lot. It can be used several ways. When it's common in the system, I'll put it this way: when a child is 4.5 to age 5, they'll begin to participate in the sacrifices and in the rituals and ceremonies. My experience was that, when I was 5, we were taught initially to make our own mask. They taught us to do that out of porcelain, and you know, it would be then dedicated to a spirit or a being that we would be representing. You as people get higher in their occultic experience, you get some individuals like your quadrant leaders, some of your councilmen, some of your mothers of darkness will be hosts for certain entities during those times. Those entities, the majority of them aren't going to all appear in their spiritual bodies. Some of them can take form like Lucifer, others cannot. So they need hosts. But you'd have your upper level, like your grand high priest and priestesses, would go through ritual cleansings and would prepare their bodies to host those fallen entities. And however long the rituals went, there would be an agreement that that spirit would be able to use their body for that amount of time. So at times, the mass would represent the top spiritual alliances that you would have in the system. So it'd be a way of identifying who's who in the club, and what are what classification is your special membership, basically. Then you get more into the darker contracts, and that's where they're going to use other things with the mass. That's going to get into the bloodlust, the evil, vile sins of these demonic spirits, and their lust for sin and for blood.
Wow. What demonic hierarchies or principalities do you believe are most active during Halloween?
In my experience, they're all active. You get all of them being highly active at that time.
Wow, that's scary.
Yeah.
I guess on Halloween, is the portals or dimensions thinner? The demonic veil, is it thinner?
Yeah, the veil is thinner at that time, which is why they've got the people meeting at that time. To go back though, as you're talking, the last one, I'll give one example. You have in the Halloween season, one of the biggest principalities involved is Ashtaroth. and you get her being summoned by several different names. But during the Halloween season, they'll summon her as the Queen of the Dead. So if you're seeing that term, the Queen of the Dead or the Queen of Hell, that's going to refer to Ashtaroth's Lilith form, and they'll be worshiping it usually at the altars of Lilith during that time. And then her light side name is the Queen of Heaven, which, where do we see that term used? We see that in connection to the Catholic Church with Mary and, their worship of Mary.
Yeah.
You'll see the very next season, Christmas, who are they worshiping? The Queen of Heaven, right? And the birth of her son, Jesus. But we know it really goes back to Samaris, and her incestuous relationship with Nimrod is really what that is. And you get a connection with Mar, M-A-R, which is, the main part of Mary, going back to Samarius. All of that goes to the worship of the water entities and the female Leviathan.
Wow.
Which even connects to your Terra Mar project.
Oh, I never heard of that.
Yeah, the ownership of the waterways. That was Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein with that.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, have you witnessed or heard testimonies of Halloween being used for mass energy harvesting?
Yes, I would say it is. You get a lot going on in the communities with that.
Yeah, I guess so.
And you'll have the quadrant leaders will be collecting that energy, usually through footprints, as one of the easiest ways they would do that, particularly in having people gather at the churches for All Saints Day, is they would have them barefoot. So then they're collecting all the energy from the soles of the feet as well as the fingerprints, which is why they have the kids touching things during Halloween. Yeah.
Wow, wow. Well, I think this was very fascinating. I think I've asked all the questions that I needed to ask. Is there something maybe that I missed?
I think we covered it pretty well. I would like to, if we're going to end, I want to share about one more event I have coming up, or two more actually. As we're getting into this, we're thinking about families, about relationships. So coming up in the month of October, I have a 4-week workshop. It will be every Thursday night from 7 to 9 or 7 to 10 p.m. But it's called Lord Make Us One. And it's going to focus on covenant relationships, God's design for relationships. And we're going to work through some of the big issues. We'll have some guest speakers sharing about codependency, different forms of addiction, how to work through those type of things. We'll also have testimony of a couple who does it right. How do we live in covenant relationship? What should that look like, especially in regards to receiving revelations together, living in prophecy together? The registration for that's available on my website, kingdomlivingwithjessie.com. And it starts the first Thursday of October. I've got the Architecture and Altars 3 course, and then the next 4 Thursdays, I've got the Lord Make Us One workshop. And then November 7th and 8th, I'm just going to have a good old-fashioned Christmas get-together. It was always my favorite time of year. I'm not talking ritually or ceremonially. I had, parts of my family that were not involved in the system, and just fun things that they would do that were very dear to me at those times and were kind of my safety, my escape. So we're going to do a get together. We're going to do just a Christmas dinner, sharing of the gospel story, singing carols together. just doing some different activities together. And that will be in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And you can register. That also is available on my website.
Wow. Wow. Thank you, Jessie, so much. I truly appreciate your knowledge and always your courage and the time that you've taken to share this with us today. Every time you come on, you leave us with so much to think about. And I know the listeners are grateful for it too, for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate your audience and everybody listening.
I want to thank Jessie